Okay, so this is Writing Tips with Rawr. I go by Rawr and I have about a little over 10 years of experience with writing. I'm not a published author, but I do have some experience, and sometimes we just need a little extra help with figuring out obstacles and struggles of being a writer. And if you have some ideas, you can leave a comment or something, like how you deal with all these issues of being a writer, because it can be tough. It can be a little. Ugh. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into this episode of showing versus telling. Now, my improv game is not top notch today, so I had to do a little bit of typing and just like a pre-storytelling. Anyway, so with when people like give some advice with writing, they'll usually say, "Show me, don't tell me." And for the most part, showing, yeah, you want to show and not tell, because not only will it increase your word count, but it also helps the reader or your audience connect a little better. Versus telling can sometimes feel a little empty, a little emotionless, like, okay, whatever kind of thing. Like, why was this important? But if we show, then there could be a little more. There's just a little something to it, right? So, here's an example of where showing is a little better than just telling the story. So, with showing the story, it was big and gangly. Carmen was sure he had never seen a fish so big. Even the snow was peculiar with how long and thin it was. It was different from the fish he caught from his grandfather's lake. From that day forth, Carmen knew what he wanted to be when he grew up. He wanted to preserve the marvelous creatures like the African garfish. So with his, we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences. So just around a paragraph, 5 sentences. And from these sentences, we get the idea of what a garfish looks like. The name of the protagonist, Carmen, and his initial thoughts of seeing a garfish, and comparing it to what he's seen from his grandfather's lake. So that tells you a little bit about Carmen's life at this point. And I didn't mention his age, but we could probably guess he's like 12, maybe coming of age, maybe. And we can also guess that because when he wanted to grow up, right? And we now know that he's holding a garfish, or at least he's looking at a garfish. We are getting so much because we are showing what the garfish is. We are showing how this is impacting Carmen. We are showing who Carmen is a little bit. Just like we're getting a lot in here. Versus the telling, we're just gonna get into that. The telling of this. Carmen looked at the African garfish and marveled. That was the moment when he knew he would become a marine biologist. So, like I said before, that seems pretty empty. Like, okay. We instantly know his name is Carmen, or like his name is Carmen. He's looking at a garfish. I'm telling you, his name is Carmen, and he's marveled at the garfish. Okay, whatever. And that was the moment that he knew he wanted to become a marine biologist. That is the path he chose, marine biologist. Okay. It's like 2 sentences, and we're not we're not getting a lot of reason to connect with Carmen. Like, I don't even know how old he is. I could probably guess, but how old is Carmen really in here? And the African garfish. What does an African garfish look like? Like, I don't know. Maybe I've never seen a garfish before. Right? And maybe I don't know what a marine biologist is. Maybe I don't know what a marine biologist does. But apparently that's what Carmen wants to be. You're just telling me what he wants. Okay. So, in here, the showing, that gives me a lot of reason to connect with Carmen. With the telling is just, this is the story, this is the impactful moment, got it. Okay, let's move on. You see where this is going? You see where this is going, right? So now we have this, and now I want to show a moment where showing versus telling might not be a great idea. Maybe sometimes we just need to tell what happened. And usually, like in very, very rare instances where telling is better than showing, is usually like towards the end when we want a mysterious or ambiguous or open ending. Like more open ending, like what really happened? So I'm gonna read this and let's see if you agree with me. Excuse me, I had to burp. Okay, so the showing. She ran into the woods, knowing her plan was foiled. Her skills of hiding in the shadows proved to save her from the impending punishment of her iniquities. The witch was able to find a lonely cottage in the forest and lived out the rest of her days in silence. However, no matter how hard she tried to whisk away the fear of her judgment, she was never truly able to live in peace. Oh, here we're showing that the witch escaped, and we're showing that she managed to find a place to live out the rest of her days, and we're showing that what she did, the horrible thing that she did, followed her for the rest of her life. So yeah, I mean, like, you kind of, in this instance, it's at the end of the story, so we kind of have, like, an ending where it's, like, fulfilling. It's like, okay, at least I know what's going on. Or, like, it's okay, but maybe telling it with a little bit of mystery, maybe that works a little better. So let's read it. She ran into the shadows, knowing her plan was foiled, and she was never seen again. We never found out what happened to her, but wherever she is, I'm sure the forest will never let her forget. And so in here, it's 2 quick paragraphs, 2 sentences, just about. And already in here, we already have about 2 perspectives or so. Or like multiple perspectives. We have the perspective of whoever she is, because at this point, like, it's towards the end of the story, but at this point, we should be able to know who she is as she runs into the shadows. We know what she did, and her plan was foiled, so we know what the heroes did to prevent her from doing the terrible thing. But she was never seen again. We know she was never seen again. No one's ever heard from her. No one knows what happened to her. And then we get our second perspective. We, the group of the heroes, right? We never found out what happened to her. They don't know what happened. Like, they don't know. But wherever she is, the hope that the forest. So the forest is another character, right? The forest is sentient. The forest will never let her forget whoever she is. Because at this point, we'll, like, again, this is towards the end of the story. We know who all the characters are. We don't need a grand like 2 pages of the demount of saying what happened to each character. Maybe sometimes we just need a little bit of mystery. So that's one of the rare instances where telling versus showing just might be a little better. But another instance where I think of where telling versus showing works again towards the end of like a movie or something, you might get like one of those ending texts that, like, this usually happens with documentaries or coming of age films, but towards the end you get like a wall of text saying this is what happened to this character after this iconic event, right? That and they went on to get an award, they went this, they did that. Like, this is what happened to this character, and so on and so forth. In those rare instances, telling can be better than showing, especially if you're doing a time crunch. Like, again, with a documentary about a person or an event, and it's one of like those really fancy documentaries. I think they're called live action documentaries, where there's actors that act out what happened. Usually that is when they'll have that little ending of the telling. But because again, like, I do not need to know the whole life of that iconic person that the documentary is about, or that event. Like we want to focus on the main thing when it comes to that documentary, and then a few things might have happened, and that's where those walls of text come in handy, because you can't fit the whole thing in a 2-hour documentary, right? And like, or even long documentaries. But anyways, I'm rambling now. Another instance, in my opinion, where telling versus showing, where the telling becomes better, is when a character is telling a story. And by that I mean, like, let's say you are describing the story of Grandpa, and you could show what Grandpa is talking about. You could. And there are instances where that has happened, like in Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, where as the monster is telling his life from birth to then, we're being shown what's happened. He's like narrating what's happening to him. But the instance that I'm talking about is like back to Grandpa. Grandpa is telling his story of something that he encountered in the woods. And again, like, we could have like a little flashback, or we can focus in on Grandpa and describe how his arms are flailing, the inclinations in his voice. We can describe like just how not compassion passionate he is about this moment in his life. And maybe we're looking at it in the perspective of the grandchild. The grandchild is marveling at the story that Grandpa is telling because of how Grandpa is telling it, right? And then we have all the dialogue of Grandpa, along with describing his personality. So in those rare instances, you can debate that in that moment, in that kind of storytelling, the telling would be better than showing. But with that said, for the most part, You want to show your audience, not tell. And this goes heavily into especially the medium with that it's more visual, like video games or movies. In those instances, you want to do as much showing as possible, but there could be moments of telling, and I mean very short moments, very brief, few moments of telling, like, don't show me Grandpa's memories of the war. Have him tell me his memories of the war. Have him tell me with emotion, like maybe he's getting choked up remembering what happened to his comrades. In that instance, telling would be so much more impactful than showing. Why? Because it goes on the same path on why we're able to connect with the audience, why our audience is able to connect with our audience, with our characters. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. So, because like it's like the same reason why you go around a campfire and you listen to everyone's stories. They're telling you the story. They can't show you the story. They can't show you what happened. They can't show you what the monster looks like. But they can tell you. They can tell you with their words, the words they use, the tone they say it in, with their they can try to show you with like the scale of the monster by reaching out their arms or something, but for the most part, they can only tell you, right? And so, again, like, when we have mostly, if it's like mostly visual, we want a lot of showing. But the occasional, very occasional, there can be telling. Because the fewer you have of telling, the more impactful, the more emotion there is to the telling. And there also leaves a bit of wonder or mystery to what the character is telling, right? Or maybe we can have some implications. But anyways, oh wow, 18 minutes. I guess I could have gone a little longer. I don't know what else to tell you, so that's really all I wanted to show you. Uh, but yeah, one thing I will add is, do not, so I said earlier, that telling could be used to, like, save some time. And I want to emphasize that I am talking about around, for once I can see my cursor. Anyways, but for, it's usually towards the end when we're trying to save some time. Like, towards the end. Okay? And again, like, it leaves some mystery. It leaves an open ending. Was she ever punished? We don't know. We can only hope. Right? But, please, 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 please do not do the telling because you're short on time. It is to save time, not because you are short on time. Okay? I know that might sound a little weird and not make sense, but, like, what I mean is, like, I'm trying to not out anyone, but there are sometimes instances in stories where they're just doing a lot of telling And maybe that's because like they're just like, you know, into characters that are um just babbling, or they're getting a little too into the narrative of the story, or they're a little short on time, and so they just, I don't know why I word this. Like it's a, like they're telling you what happened. Like they're telling you this happened, this happened, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. When they could have spent a little more time of showing, which is, this is how I felt, and or um like the characters having a bit of an emotional breakdown, or um there's a moment of describing what's happening. Um, trying to think how to word this. But yeah, like just very few moments of telling, and so, so that only took you a few minutes. That only took me a few minutes. But yeah, for the most part, we want to show, not tell. There are very, very few moments we want to tell. Very few moments. And I can't think of anything else to add, so I think I'll end it here for you. Let me know in the comments how you deal with it, or what are moments where you think telling would be better than showing. How you show in your writing style instead of telling. Um, or maybe you're just struggling with something, and like concerning writing or storytelling, maybe I can help. I don't know. But yeah, this video is kind of short, and that's okay. So hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.